In a small, peaceful town surrounded by lush green hills and winding roads, there lived a woman named Clara. She wasn't someone who stood out in a crowd. Her clothes were simple, plain blouses, long skirts, and always a pair of worn-out shoes. She worked at the local school as a librarian, spending her days organizing books, helping students find stories they'd love, and quietly observing the world around her. To most people, she seemed like an ordinary woman leading an ordinary life. But beneath her calm exterior lay a secret that no one in the town could have guessed. Clara's mornings started early. She would wake up before sunrise, sip a cup of tea while watching the birds outside her window, and then walk to the school library. The library was her favorite place. It smelled of old paper and ink, and its shelves were filled with countless tales waiting to be discovered. Students often found her sitting behind the desk, reading or writing something in a small notebook. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then, her words were few but kind. Because of this, many assumed she was shy or reserved, perhaps even a little lonely. What no one knew, however, was that Clara had once lived a very different life. Years ago, she had been celebrated across Europe as one of the greatest pianists of her generation. Her concerts drew thousands of people, and critics praised her ability to bring music to life with every note she played. She had traveled the world, performed in grand concert halls, and received standing ovations night after night. But all of that changed when tragedy struck. A personal loss shook her deeply, leaving her unable to face the spotlight anymore. Heartbroken and exhausted, she decided to leave everything behind: her career, her fame, and her identity as a musician. Now living in this quiet town, Clara felt safe. No one here knew about her past, and she preferred it that way. She didn't want attention or praise. She simply wanted to live a peaceful life away from the pressures of the stage. The townsfolk admired her for her kindness and thought of her as a gentle soul who kept to herself. They had no idea that the same hands that now shelved books and flipped pages had once commanded the keys of a piano with unmatched skill. Every evening, after finishing her work at the library, Clara would return home to her cozy cottage on the edge of town. Inside, tucked away in a corner of her living room, stood an old upright piano. It was covered with a dusty cloth, almost forgotten by everyone except her. Occasionally, late at night when the world was silent, she would lift the cloth and let her fingers glide over the keys. The melodies she created stayed within the walls of her home, never reaching the ears of anyone else. For Clara, these moments weren't about performance. They were about remembering who she used to be and finding comfort in the music she still loved. Though Clara appeared content with her simple life, there was a part of her that missed the thrill of playing for an audience. Yet the thought of stepping back into the world she had left behind frightened her. So she continued to live quietly, keeping her extraordinary talent hidden from the world. Little did she know, fate had other plans. And soon, her secret would come knocking at her door. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Clara was arranging books in the library, the school principal, Mrs. Thompson, approached her with a warm but slightly nervous smile. "Clara," she began, glancing around to ensure no students were within earshot, "I need to ask you for a favor." Clara paused and looked up, her expression calm but curious. She nodded gently, inviting Mrs. Thompson to continue. The principal explained that the annual talent show was just 2 weeks away, and they were struggling to find enough participants. The event was an important tradition of the school. It brought the community together and gave students a chance to showcase their skills. However, this year, several acts had dropped out last minute, leaving a gap in the program. One of the teachers suggested including a piano performance featuring Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata, one of the most complex and demanding pieces ever composed. But finding someone willing and able to play it was proving difficult. Mrs. Thompson hesitated before continuing. "We thought, well, we wondered if you might consider doing it." Clara blinked in surprise. Her mind raced as she tried to process the request. She knew exactly what the Hammerklavier Sonata entailed. Its intricate passages and emotional depth made it a challenge even for seasoned professionals. Yet here was Mrs. Thompson asking her, a woman everyone assumed barely knew how to read sheet music, to take on such a monumental task. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly, shaking her head. "I don't think I'm the right person for this. I haven't played in years, and I'm not nearly skilled enough." Her voice carried a quiet firmness, but Mrs. Thompson wasn't ready to give up. "Oh, Clara, please think about it," she urged. "It doesn't have to be perfect. It's more about inspiring the students. If someone like you can attempt something so challenging, it will encourage them to try new things too." Clara felt a pang of discomfort. She understood the sentiment behind Mrs. Thompson's words, but the idea of stepping onto a stage again, even under the guise of being an amateur, felt overwhelming. Still, she didn't want to disappoint the principal or let down the school. After a long pause, she reluctantly agreed to give it a try, though deep down, she hoped they would forget about the whole thing. Word of Clara's involvement spread quickly among the staff. By the end of the day, whispers filled the teachers' lounge. Some expressed admiration for her willingness to step out of her comfort zone, while others raised eyebrows in disbelief. Mr. Hargrove, the music teacher, was particularly vocal about his doubts. Over lunch, he leaned back in his chair and chuckled dismissively. "Clara, playing the hammerclavier. That's ambitious, to say the least." His colleagues laughed nervously, unsure whether to agree or defend her. Despite the skepticism, no one dared suggest replacing her. They were running out of options. Meanwhile, Clara returned home feeling uneasy. She sat by her piano, staring at the keys as memories of her past performances flooded her mind. Part of her wanted to walk away from the commitment entirely, but another part felt a flicker of excitement. Could she really do it? More importantly, should she? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through her window, Clara placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The notes flowed effortlessly, filling the room with a sound so rich and powerful it seemed to breathe life into the stillness. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to fully embrace the music, letting it wash over her like a wave. Unbeknownst to anyone else, Clara had already decided she would play the piece, not because she needed validation, but because she owed it to herself to see where this unexpected opportunity might lead. As the days passed, whispers about Clara's upcoming performance grew louder. The news had spread beyond the teachers' lounge and reached the students, who buzzed with curiosity during lunch breaks and in the hallways. Some were excited at the prospect of seeing their quiet librarian take the stage, while others couldn't help but doubt her ability. "Do you think she can actually pull it off?" one student asked during art class. Another shrugged, replying, "I heard she hasn't played piano in years. This is going to be interesting." The teachers, too, remained divided in their opinions. Mrs. Thompson continued to support Clara wholeheartedly, believing that her participation would send a powerful message to the students about courage and perseverance. But Mr. Hargrove, the music teacher, struggled to hide his skepticism. During a staff meeting, he leaned forward and said, "Look, I'm all for encouraging people to try new things, but this isn't just any piece. It's Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata. Even professional pianists spend months preparing for something like this. Are we setting her up for failure?" His words hung heavy in the air, leaving an uncomfortable silence among the group. A few teachers nodded hesitantly, agreeing that perhaps they'd pushed Clara into something beyond her reach. Others defended her decision, pointing out that she'd agreed willingly and deserved the chance to prove herself. Still, no matter how much they debated, none of them truly knew what Clara was capable of. Meanwhile, Clara kept her composure, attending rehearsals without complaint. She arrived after school hours when the auditorium was empty, sitting alone at the grand piano as the soft glow of twilight filtered through the windows. Her fingers danced over the keys with precision and grace, weaving together the intricate harmonies of the sonata. Each note carried emotion, anger, longing, joy, all hidden beneath the surface of her calm demeanor. No one saw these private moments. She made sure of it. To everyone else, she appeared hesitant, even clumsy, fumbling through fragments of the piece during brief check-ins with the staff. One evening, as Clara practiced late into the night, she noticed a shadow moving near the auditorium door. Startled, she stopped playing and turned to see Mr. Hargrove standing there, looking both surprised and embarrassed. "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt," he stammered, stepping inside. "I was just checking on the sound system." Clara smiled faintly, closing the lid of the piano. "It's fine," she said softly. "Is there anything you need?" Mr. Hargrove hesitated, then gestured toward the piano. "You don't have to answer this, but are you sure you're comfortable with this? If you're feeling overwhelmed, we can find another solution." His tone was kinder than usual, almost apologetic. Clara met his gaze steadily, her expression unreadable. "I'll be fine," she replied simply. Though her voice betrayed no hint of frustration, inside, she felt a flicker of irritation. Did he really believe she couldn't handle it? After he left, Clara sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the conversation. She understood why people doubted her. They only saw the quiet librarian who rarely spoke about her past. They didn't know the countless hours she'd spent mastering the piano, the sacrifices she'd made, or the fire that still burned within her whenever she touched the keys. Part of her wanted to confront their assumptions, to show them exactly what she was capable of. But another part reminded her that she wasn't doing this for them. This was for herself. A chance to reconnect with the music she loved, even if only for one night. With renewed determination, Clara reopened the piano and began to play again. The notes filled the empty auditorium, rich and resonant, carrying echoes of her former life. Outside, the stars shone brightly in the clear night sky, unaware of the storm of emotions brewing inside the woman who played below. The days leading up to the talent show were filled with mounting pressure for Clara. Every time she walked through the school hallways, she felt eyes on her, some curious, others skeptical. Teachers stopped her between classes to ask how her practice was going, their questions laced with concern. "Are you feeling confident?" Mrs. Thompson asked one morning, patting her shoulder encouragingly. Clara gave a polite nod and smiled faintly, but inside, she bristled at the implication that confidence was something she lacked. It wasn't just the teachers who offered unsolicited advice. Even some of the students began chiming in. One afternoon, as Clara shelved books in the library, a group of older students approached her hesitantly. "Miss Clara," one of them said, "we heard you're playing that really hard piano piece. Is it true?" She nodded, keeping her tone light. "Yes, I'm giving it a try." The students exchanged glances before another spoke up. "Maybe you should pick something easier, just in case." Clara blinked, momentarily stunned by the suggestion. She forced a small laugh and replied, "Thank you for your concern, but I think I'll stick with what I've chosen." Despite their well-meaning intentions, each comment chipped away at her patience. Clara understood why they doubted her. They only saw the quiet librarian who kept to herself. They didn't know the countless hours she spent perfecting her craft, or the years she dedicated to mastering pieces far more challenging than Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata. Yet, instead of revealing her true abilities, Clara chose to endure their doubts silently, masking her frustration behind a calm exterior. Even Mr. Hargrove, the music teacher, couldn't resist weighing in. During one rehearsal, he sat in the front row of the auditorium, notebook in hand, as Clara played a short section of the sonata. When she finished, he cleared his throat and offered his critique. "You're doing well," he began cautiously. "But this part here," he pointed to a particularly complex passage, "might be too difficult for someone without formal training. Perhaps we could simplify it." Clara froze for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the keys. Simplify it. The very idea felt like an insult to everything she had worked for. She turned to face him, her expression carefully neutral. "I appreciate your input, Mr. Hargrove," she said evenly, "but I believe I can manage this section as written." Her tone left no room for argument, and Mr. Hargrove shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Of course," he muttered, scribbling something in his notebook. As soon as he left the auditorium, Clara exhaled deeply, shaking her head. The audacity of his suggestion burned in her chest, but she reminded herself that he meant no harm. He simply didn't know better. That evening, as Clara practiced alone in the dimly lit auditorium, her emotions bubbled to the surface. She played with fierce intensity, letting her frustration pour into every note. The music swelled and crashed around her, a storm of sound that mirrored the turmoil inside her heart. How could they not see it? How could they doubt her so easily? But even as anger flared within her, she also felt a pang of sadness. These people weren't trying to hurt her. They genuinely believed they were helping. Their lack of faith wasn't malicious. It was born out of ignorance. As the final notes faded into silence, Clara sat still for a moment, her hands resting on the keys. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the weight of her emotions settle. This wasn't about proving them wrong, she reminded herself. It was about honoring the music and herself. With renewed resolve, she straightened her posture and began again, her fingers moving with precision and passion. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying whispers of anticipation for the night when the truth would finally come to light. The night before the talent show, Clara found herself alone in the auditorium, bathed in the soft glow of a single spotlight. The school was quiet now, its usual hum of activity replaced by an almost sacred stillness. She sat at the grand piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, staring at the sheet music propped open before her. Though she didn't need it, she knew every note by heart. The presence of the pages somehow grounded her, connecting her to the countless hours she had spent perfecting this piece. Her mind wandered back to the early days of her career, when Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata had first entered her life. It had been a daunting challenge then, just as it was now, but for entirely different reasons. Back then, she had tackled it with youthful ambition, eager to prove herself to the world. Now, years later, she approached it with a deeper understanding, not just of the music, but of herself. Each note carried weight, each phrase told a story, and tonight, as she prepared to play it once more, she felt like she was rediscovering a part of her soul that had long been buried. Clara placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening chords rang out, bold and commanding, filling the empty auditorium with their power. As the piece unfolded, her body seemed to disappear into the music. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing slowed, and her movements became fluid, as though the piano itself were guiding her. The difficult passages that had once intimidated even seasoned musicians flowed effortlessly under her fingers, each note precise and deliberate. As she played, memories washed over her. Memories of standing ovations in grand concert halls, of critics praising her technical brilliance and emotional depth. But there were darker memories too. The crushing weight of expectations, the loneliness of life on tour, and the personal tragedy that had driven her away from the stage. These thoughts threatened to overwhelm her, but instead of letting them pull her under, she channeled them into the music. Every crescendo became a cry of triumph, every soft passage a whisper of healing. When she reached the final movement, Clara poured everything she had into the performance. Her hands raced across the keys, weaving together cascading runs and thunderous chords with breathtaking precision. The music built to a powerful climax before fading into a tender, almost fragile resolution. When the last note hung in the air, she sat motionless, her chest rising and falling with the effort of what she had just accomplished. For a moment, the silence felt deafening. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized how much this piece meant to her, not just as a musician, but as a person. Playing it again had stirred something deep within her, forcing her to confront emotions she had kept locked away for years. Yet, instead of feeling burdened, she felt lighter, as if shedding those old layers of pain had allowed her to breathe freely for the first time in ages. Clara closed the lid of the piano gently, as though tucking away a precious treasure. She glanced around the empty auditorium, imagining what tomorrow would bring. Would the audience see the years of dedication behind her performance? Would they understand the journey that had led her here? Or would they simply hear the music and feel its beauty? She didn't have answers to these questions, nor did she need them. What mattered was that she had faced her fears, embraced her past, and found joy in the act of creation once more. As she turned off the spotlight and walked out of the auditorium, the cool night air greeted her like an old friend. Tomorrow would come soon enough, but for now, she allowed herself to savor the quiet peace of knowing she was ready. The night of the talent show arrived, and the school auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents, students, and teachers filled the rows of seats, chatting animatedly as they waited for the performances to begin. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, and the stage was set with twinkling lights that cast a warm glow over the polished wooden floor. Clara stood backstage, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, feeling both calm and nervous at the same time. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, the same clothes she'd worn countless times before, but tonight they felt different, almost ceremonial. As the program unfolded, applause erupted after each act. A group of third graders performed a cheerful dance routine, their giggles echoing through the hall. A high school senior sang a soulful rendition of a pop song, earning loud cheers from his classmates. And then, finally, it was Clara's turn. Mrs. Thompson stepped onto the stage to introduce her, her voice warm and encouraging. Next, we have someone very special, a beloved member of our school community who has kindly agreed to take on one of the most challenging pieces ever written for piano. Please welcome Clara. The audience clapped politely as Clara walked onto the stage. Her presence was understated. There were no dramatic gestures or flashy outfits, just a quiet woman making her way to the piano. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some leaned forward in curiosity, while others exchanged doubtful glances. Mr. Hargrove sat near the front, his arms crossed, clearly skeptical about what he was about to hear. Clara sat down at the piano and took a deep breath. The room fell silent as she placed her hands on the keys. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, letting the stillness settle around her. Then she began to play. From the first note, the atmosphere changed. The opening chords of Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata filled the auditorium with a power that seemed to shake the very air. Gasps rippled through the audience as they realized this was no amateur performance. Clara's fingers moved with breathtaking speed and precision, weaving together intricate harmonies and rhythms that left everyone spellbound. Each note rang out with clarity and emotion, carrying the weight of years of practice and passion. As the piece progressed, the audience forgot to breathe. They watched in awe as Clara tackled the most difficult passages with ease, her hands flying across the keys without hesitation. The music swelled and soared, filling every corner of the room with its intensity. When she reached the final movement, the energy became electric. The cascading runs and thunderous chords brought several people to the edge of their seats, their faces reflecting pure amazement. When the last note faded into silence, the room remained utterly still for a heartbeat. Then, like a dam breaking, the audience erupted into applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a standing ovation, with people rising to their feet, cheering and shouting bravo. Tears streamed down some faces, including those of Mrs. Thompson and even Mr. Hargrove, who looked utterly stunned. He had doubted her ability. But now, all he could do was stare in disbelief at the woman who had just delivered a performance worthy of the world's greatest concert halls. Clara rose slowly from the bench, her expression serene. She gave a small bow, her eyes scanning the crowd briefly before she turned and walked off stage. Backstage, she exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall as the sounds of applause continued to echo behind her. She hadn't played for recognition or approval, but hearing the reaction of the audience stirred something deep within her. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as the quiet librarian, but as the musician she truly was. Though she didn't linger to soak up the praise, Clara knew this moment would stay with her forever. It wasn't just a performance. It was a bridge between her past and present, a reminder of who she was and who she could still be. After Clara's breathtaking performance, the auditorium remained alive with chatter long after the talent show ended. Students and teachers alike couldn't stop talking about what they had just witnessed. "Did you see her hands? They were moving so fast," one student exclaimed to her friend as they left the hall. Another added, "I didn't know she could play like that. She's amazing." The buzz of excitement followed Clara even as she tried to slip away unnoticed. But escaping wasn't easy. As soon as she stepped out of the backstage area, a group of curious students surrounded her. "Miss Clara, how did you learn to play like that?" one asked, his eyes wide with admiration. Another chimed in, "Are you secretly famous or something?" Clara smiled softly, touched by their enthusiasm, but unsure how to respond. She simply said, "I've been playing for a long time," leaving the details vague. The teachers weren't far behind. Mrs. Thompson rushed over, beaming with pride. "Clara, that was extraordinary. Why didn't you tell us you were such an incredible pianist?" she asked, her voice brimming with awe. Clara hesitated for a moment before replying. "It's not something I talk about often." Her tone was gentle but firm, hinting at a deeper story without revealing too much. Mr. Hargrove, however, couldn't stay silent. He approached her later that evening, looking more sheepish than usual. "Clara," he began, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea you were capable of that. What you did tonight was beyond anything I've ever seen." His words carried genuine remorse, and Clara appreciated his honesty. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I understand why you doubted me. Most people would." As the days passed, curiosity about Clara only grew stronger. Students began asking her questions during library hours, eager to learn more about her background. Some even brought books about famous musicians, hoping to find clues about her past. Teachers invited her to lunch gatherings, subtly probing for stories about her life before the town. At first, Clara deflected their inquiries with polite smiles and vague answers, but eventually she realized she couldn't avoid the topic forever. One afternoon, after a particularly persistent question from Mrs. Thompson, Clara finally decided to share a little of her story. Sitting in the cozy corner of the library, she spoke softly, her gaze fixed on the worn pages of a book in front of her. "Years ago, I used to perform concerts all over Europe," she admitted. "I loved music more than anything. It was my entire world. But then, something happened. Something painful. I needed to leave that life behind and start fresh." Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued, "This town has given me peace, and I'm grateful for it. That's why I never mention my past." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. Mrs. Thompson reached out and placed a hand on Clara's arm. "We're so sorry for prying," she said sincerely. "But we're also honored to have someone like you here with us." Mr. Hargrove nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced by deep respect. "You've inspired all of us, Clara, not just with your talent, but with your humility." Though Clara appreciated their kind words, she made it clear that she wasn't seeking recognition or fame. "I don't need applause or attention," she told them. "What matters to me is sharing music because it brings joy. If my playing can inspire even one person, then it's worth it." Her revelation sparked a newfound admiration among the staff and students. They saw her not just as the quiet librarian, but as someone who had overcome challenges and chosen to live humbly despite her extraordinary gifts. While Clara still preferred to keep a low profile, she found herself opening up little by little, allowing others to glimpse the depth of her character and the passion that music ignited within her. In the weeks following the talent show, Clara's life began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. The students and teachers who had once seen her as just the quiet librarian now looked at her with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Some brought her sheet music, asking if she'd be willing to help them learn a new piece. Others simply stopped by the library more often, eager to share their own musical aspirations or ask for advice. Clara welcomed these interactions, finding joy in nurturing the creativity of those around her. Encouraged by the school staff, Clara agreed to teach piano lessons after hours. At first, she was hesitant, worried that stepping back into the world of music might stir up old emotions. But as she sat beside her first student, a shy seventh grader named Lily who dreamed of playing like Clara, she felt a spark of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. Patiently, she guided Lily through simple scales and melodies, watching as the girl's confidence grew with each lesson. Soon, word spread, and more students signed up, filling the afternoons with laughter, practice, and the occasional wrong note. Clara also began performing again, though on a much smaller scale than before. She played at community events, accompanying choirs during holiday concerts, or offering solo pieces at local gatherings. Each time she stepped onto a stage, no matter how small, she felt a sense of purpose, not for applause, but for connection. Her performances reminded people of the beauty and power of music, and they left inspired to explore it themselves. The townsfolk, too, started seeing Clara differently. Where once they had dismissed her as unremarkable, they now held her in high regard, not because of her virtuosity, but because of her humility and generosity. Neighbors invited her to dinner parties, where conversations often turned to music and art. Children ran up to her on the street, excitedly telling her about their latest practice sessions. Clara embraced this newfound bond with the community, grateful for the warmth and acceptance she found there. One evening, as she walked home from an outdoor concert under a starlit sky, Clara reflected on how far she'd come since arriving in the town. She thought about the tragedy that had driven her away from the stage, and the fear that had kept her hidden for so long. Playing Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata at the talent show hadn't erased those scars, but it had helped her heal in ways she hadn't expected. It wasn't fame or recognition she craved. It was the simple joy of making music and sharing it with others. Her cottage on the edge of town became a gathering place for young musicians. On weekends, laughter and melody spilled out of her windows as students gathered for impromptu jam sessions. Clara would sit quietly among them, offering guidance when needed but mostly letting them discover their own voices. For someone who had spent years avoiding attention, she found unexpected happiness in being part of something bigger than herself. Though Clara never returned to the international stage, she didn't miss it. Instead, she built a new kind of legacy, one rooted in teaching, mentoring, and inspiring others. Her past remained a cherished chapter of her life, but her present offered something equally precious: peace, purpose, and belonging. And as she sat at her piano late one night, playing softly for no one but herself, she realized she had finally found what she'd been searching for all along: a way to honor both her love for music and her desire for a quiet, meaningful life.